So just to kind of get started, we'll kind of take a look at what's going on. It is week 10. We have this week's worth of curriculum. Next week is like, we were completely off. The week after is like full on React. And then the week after that is full on React with Redux. And then as you all know, the last 2 weeks are going to be group projects. But before then, I hope you've been thinking about your own personal project and what you would like to build. I'd like to get some semblance of an understanding of what everyone wants to build by the end of tomorrow, because on Friday you're going to pitch your idea out to everybody else, just to kind of get some experience pitching your idea just in like a 30-second or 45 seconds of like, have you ever wanted to do XYZ but couldn't do it? Through my app you'll be able to do it, whatever. And then the technologies you want to use for that, which is most likely just going to be Ruby on Rails.
You're not going to be able to like incorporate React into it at this point?
At this point, probably not. Yeah. At this point, you don't. You'll have just started React, like real React stuff tomorrow, building stuff out, because right now it's just like small little exercises just to get used to it. And then Friday, yeah, so you're just going to have like 2 days worth of React, so it's not going to be enough to really use it quite yet. Today at 3 p.m., DRW is going to be coming in to do like kind of like a presentation of this is what our company is about, this is what we do, this is the position that we're offering, and if you have any questions about what they do, you can ask it to them. I'm actually like, I say this every group, but it's really kind of incredible that, you know, DRW is actually hiring interns, because when I was searching for a job around my second job or so, I asked, hey, are you, I applied and I said, are you accepting any like junior candidates? Like, all our juniors have 7 years of experience. I was like, all right, whatever, you know, like, it seemed a little like ridiculous. But then when I found out how much money they make and how much money they're responsible for, I can understand why. Yeah, for Code Platoon's history, we've had 2 people go there. One person has got a full-time, like it was a 3-month internship, then it became a 6-month internship, then it became a 12-month internship, and then they got a final offer at the very end, which is really unheard of for someone who just came out of boot camp, because it's just, they compete with Google and Apple and Tesla and all like the major companies because they're able to pay on the same scale, so to speak.
I thought there were 2 people. I thought there was a male and a female that ended up going there and both got jobs.
No, just one. Then they were just two people went in.
Oh, I think there's 3 people.
No, so one person went in for a 3-month, became 6-month, became a 12-month, okay, and they got an offer. The other one went for a 3-month internship that did not amount to anything.
All right.
But when they went for internship, how did they do?
You can ask today what they would build. I don't know the first person very well. Oh, thanks.
Do you want one?
Sure. Why not? And they are going to be coming and delivering T-shirts, but evidently I just got this nice scarf. Wait, when did you get one?
Yesterday, you were here. I came yesterday.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, I guess everyone gets free swag. They're also coming today with T-shirts.
Chris and Renee come?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think I don't think so. I think it's 2 like actual people who present on college campuses. So they recruit heavily at like Northwestern, University of Chicago, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I don't know what the first person built, Nikki, but I know the second person built an internal tool for recruiting. So it's kind of like they wanted like an internal app so that recruiters could use to like, you know, like upload resumes and, you know, things of that nature. So I saw the code. It was stuff that you should all be able to do. They used Sinatra. So it's similar. I mean, you have some experience with Sinatra. So it's a little bit simpler than Rails. So they just figured that I probably don't need all of this stuff that Rails gives me.
Like who figured that? The intern figured that, or the person who?
Chris. Chris likes Sinatra. So, and Chris was in charge of the last intern. So Chris said, "Let's do it as Sinatra." So, because you usually end up doing what your boss likes.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I will be doing. It's kind of a fun game. It's another Beyond Tech. A little more hands-on with this one. I'm going to talk about jobs and salary negotiations, and then we're going to play a game at the end where you're going to partner up with one other person in the room and try to get as much money. You are either going to be an applicant or you're going to be the person trying to like give them the job. One person is going to try to get as much money out of the person as possible, and one person is trying to give as little money as possible. To just kind of give you an idea of like how to like negotiate at the table. And then yeah, this weekend, if you're doing the Safe Agile certification, it'll be here from 8 to 5 on Saturday. I will not be here, so I will need one of you to open the room who are coming. So I think it's just you, Deja, and John, if I'm not mistaken. So it's downstairs, 1776 on Block Box.
Yeah, I remember. You got it, though. I know how to do it.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so throughout this week, I have been frantically in the back trying to type up everything, all the notes that like Kara and I are using, so that we all have like a single point of reference. Monday we covered like creating an app without Create React app. Yesterday we covered Create React app. Monday we did things like what's Node Package Manager, what's ES6, what's Mocha, and things like. Actually, let me just ask, what's NPM? What is NPM and what does it stand for? What does that mean? Nope. What does it do?
Like a gem thing. Like Ruby Gems.
It's like Ruby Gems.
Equivalent.
Yeah, but what does Ruby Gems do? What's a gem?
It's like pre-written code, so you don't want to.
Yeah, it's just pre-written code, libraries other people have written ahead of time to make your life easier as a developer. What's that? It's cheating code.
Yeah,
it's not cheating code. It's there for a reason, so we don't have to do it. Yeah.
I'm bad.
Round up.
So yeah, Node Package Manager. It's basically all these libraries are written in the JavaScript language that you can use if you have a Node app. So yeah, there's hundreds of things. Like we were using things like HTTP server. And you can kind of see some of the things here on the right side. Like in the last 24 hours, 20,000 people have downloaded this or used it in some sort of project. In the last week, there's 110,000 downloads and almost 500,000 in the last month. So this is a very well maintained and very well used Node Package library, Node Package Manager. What is ES6? We talked about it on Monday.
ECMAScript 6.
What's ECMAScript?
JavaScript.
Yeah, ECMAScript's the formal name for JavaScript. What does the 6 refer to? That is true, but that's valid. What is the 6 at the end mean?
It's a big change.
It's an addition. That's exactly what it is. So there's a new edition of JavaScript that comes out every single year. In 2015, it was just ES6, and that was like the real big major like change in the marketplace, where we started seeing things like let and cons and classes and things to look a little bit more like Ruby. And then finally, what's Mocha and Chai? It's a test, which is similar to Ruby's RSpec. Pretty much, that's it. So yeah, I'm going to continue to update Monday, and I'm halfway through Tuesday's write-up. So if you want to go back, Kara has videos up. There's videos from the previous cohorts. There's this thing, and we are physically present. So if you need to go back and finish any of these challenges, please do. Then yesterday we got into Create React App, which was basically everything we learned on Monday. Everything we learned on Monday were like separate small pieces that we had to configure ourselves. And then when we did Create React App, it just gave it to us all together. We had 4 challenges yesterday. One was just to kind of learn the ins and outs. And then we had detention, palindrome, state abbreviator. Today, there's nothing new. So it's just kind of a day to rest because there's, 8 challenges and some of them get really difficult. I still have not finished Hangman because it's driving me insane. So I'll be working on that today. But I figured it'd be a good use of our time this morning to kind of go over mute button. And then we can kind of go through each individual component now that you've had 2 days to kind of stew with React for a little bit. How's that sound?
Yeah. But can you go more detail about when you use React and you have to do what they call it, the state?
Yeah, definitely. We're definitely gonna be dealing with state in the mute button. And so state is one big thing. Is there anything else that's confusing?
Render, like if you render different function,
Sure.
it's still the same one file or different file?
And we can get, so we got state, we have render. What else? Is that it for now? Feel free to interrupt and let me know if you have any questions. All right, let's clone this guy down, and then I'm going to minimize this and minimize that. I have 3 windows open just like usual. Open up iTurn. All right, so first things first, let's kind of like read through what our README is so we have a clear idea of where we're starting and where we're going to end up. All right, so basically, we're going to have a mute button. Let me open some things up. We open Reel and Finder. I basically have a mute button. Oh my gosh, why is this not open? Preview. The preview can't open it. I don't know if you can see this. It's very, very small, but this is the sound. This is kind of like a small sound icon. And there's another small like icon with a slash through it. It's a more or less a mute button. So I'm going to click a button. I'm going to click on like one picture, and it's going to toggle to the other picture. I'm going to click again. It's going to toggle back and forth. All right. So first things first. We have nothing here. All we have is just a mute button with some icons and then the GitHub system files that Kara has created for us. And please actually use these things and fill them out. So first things first, we're going to write create React app, and we'll just have, I'll call this mute or something like that. So similarly in like Rails, we did Rails new, some sort of like file name, like that generated an entire Rails project for us. And in the same sense, when we do create React app whatever, in our case we did create React app mute, we're going to create an app called mute, which has all of the React stuff built in. This does take quite a while. There's actually a small little comic to pass the time. Oh boy, my NPM. Here we go. There's a lot of stuff being installed. You can't really see it right now, but there's a cute little comic here. There's an NPM package delivery, and then they start with one and end up with a million things. And you can kind of see it when we do npm install. CD into mute.
And the total in that command line summary is like, it was like 12,600. No, it was 1,266 or something packages.
Yeah, that was like some of the guys I was working with. That was like their comment about Rails. Like that, if you install Rails app, there's like so much stuff that you probably aren't even going to use. But so this is even more so than. Yeah.
But what make the to be able to use like create package, we have to install the npm version.
Yeah, so I think everyone has npm installed. Everyone has Node installed, which is why we kind of ran through that on the first day. Create React app is just an npm package. So it's kind of like when you did gem install Rails and then you did Rails new. So you installed you installed Rails first, and then using that Rails thing that you've installed, you can create new Rails apps. Similarly, you did npm install create React app. Now you can run create React app to create new React apps.
when you set up the new laptop or whatever, like, you just have to install npm.
You have that installed node and then npm. So yeah, you can kind of see there's 913 things inside of React that come for free, and all of this extra stuff comes in for free. Things that you will most likely need to get your React app up and running. All right, so I'm gonna just do a few fancy things. Not really fancy. I'm just going to grab all of this garbage here and throw it over here. Let's just.
Sorry, John, what was that? What was the last step? What did you do?
So when I clone this down,
Yeah.
like there's only a folder for pictures with the mute button and the other button.
Mhm.
So this by itself is not a React app right now. This is literally just I cloned down a couple pictures.
Yep.
So I wanted to create a React app using the create React app thing here.
Yeah.
And then remember when I created a React app, I called it mute.
Okay.
And then so basically all the contents were inside of mute instead of where I wanted it to be. So I just dragged it over up one layer, and I can get rid of this now.
You can also do create React app dot.
Ah, I could have done that too.
Yeah, but it's useful to know that might cause, depending on what folders you already have in that current directory, it might push back if you have certain files that like the example that you had with two readmes, like it'll either overwrite it or it'll say that there's a conflict and give you a decision, or it'll break on you. Can't remember what it does.
All right, so now I have a mute button, which is the thing I've cloned down. Before it was just a folder of different icons, and now I have like all of the React stuff that I need that's built in. And we'll kind of break down what we have here. So this giant folder here is called node modules. And what this is a binary version of all of these things, like address.js, accepts.js, array map, like all of this stuff is stuff that you are going to need, but they are saved as binary files. So what that means is when I deploy this app and it's loaded into your browser, all of this code is also loaded in so that your browser can handle most of the requests on its own. That's why you have things like, so yesterday people were asking, what is an example of a non-Rails app versus what is an example of a React app versus a non-React app? So I know I'm almost certain that Groupon.com is not a Rails, it's not React app. So that means when I come in here, there's full requests and responses being made. So I'm here, like I get to this page, and when I say I want to take a look at this Newegg gift card thing, that's actually a pretty good deal. 50 with 5. I mean, there's the holidays coming up, so it's 10%.
It's a Newegg.
Newegg is another version of Amazon. It's just another online retailer. It's good for electronics and stuff like that. You might want to buy this. I don't know. It's up to you.
Just a plug for.
What's that? I get a commission on every single one that you buy. But you can kind of see that whenever I click on anything, like on any sort of deal or something, there's an entire request and response happening, which means that it takes around 2 or 3 seconds per request and response. If I want to do a concealed carry class or something like that, you can kind of see I'm making an entire request to wherever the Groupon servers are, and they're coming back. It's a little bit slow. I want to take a look at, let's take a look at automotive deals. 1, 2, 3. So about 3 seconds to load up everything on the page. There's an entire request and response cycle going back and forth. And that's generally what the web is. And there's no problem with that, except for the fact that people are getting really, really annoyed when it's super slow. Like I probably would get frustrated at this if it took more than 2 seconds, which it does for everything. And that's just because what we're used to gets faster and faster. But if you go to...
How do internet speeds play into this? Like, so you're at your house, if you have a React app, you have Facebook or whatever, is that going to be slow as well? Because it's got to load everything on your computer twice, going in and out? You know what I'm saying?
I believe it'll be slow upon the initial load because it has to bring in all the stuff.
Yeah.
And once it's loaded in, it'll be
much faster.
Much faster, yeah. Okay. So I just so So Groupon.com, remember, 2 or 3 seconds per request. I click on this, makes a request all the way to the server, and then comes back with a response, and then it shows up on my page. Instagram is an app that's actually built completely on React, according to the internet. I don't know for sure. And it makes sense because Facebook owns Instagram, if I'm not mistaken. They do? All right. All right, let's say I want to go to National Geographic here. You can kind of see it's pretty quick, right? And basically what's happening here is everything's being loaded on the page all at one time. So like the code behind it is all of these node modules, the things that make the experience good and make the app pretty quick, is all loaded into my browser. So my browser is doing most of the heavy lifting at this point. I can click on a picture and it loads up pretty quick. And then I can go to the next one. It's automatically loaded. I can go down to the bottom of the page and you can see how quickly it makes a request and response, makes a request and gets a response back. Most of this stuff is actually already loaded inside my browser. I'm not making any new requests. And if I am, it's happening in the background so seamlessly that like you don't even know it's happening. But you can kind of see, I'm going to click on like local online learning. 1,
What do you
2,
mean by it's already in the
3.
browser? Like you can go offline right now, or does it still work?
I think that is ish. So it's basically.
Can we try that?
What's that?
Is it like
Maybe, I don't know. That's actually a great question. So I'm not going to refresh the page, but oh crap. What I mean by it's all loaded in is like most of the data that you're going to want to use, like upon this, and like if I'm here, right, they're assuming that I'm only going to look at like the first, looks like 16 photos. And by having almost everything loaded in for like the first 16 photos, I don't have to constantly make requests back and forth. It loads in all the thumbnails. It loads in the number of comments, so that when I hover over it, even when this is already loaded in. Like if the data was not loaded in when I loaded up this page, and I hover over it, it would say like, okay, let me make a request out to the back end and see like, hey, how many likes were there and how many conversation comments were on here. But by having, obviously this is not going to work, but by having like all of this data being loaded in, like the thumbnail and the number of comments and everything, we'll find out if this totally falls apart or not. So yeah, I'm not an expert on React,
Yeah.
but all I know is it loads in much more stuff to offload the load to your server, and instead puts it on your browser. So your Google Chrome will handle most of the heavy lifting rather than their server. You're only going to touch their server when you want to, you get to the bottom of the page and you want to see more photos, then it'll make a request in the background.
It's better than utilizing like only Ajax then, because you're only loading the components that need to be refreshed. You're not making any additional changes to the other pieces of the site, like the header, the search bar, or any of the previous things that were loaded to the screen. You're just refreshing what needs to be refreshed in that moment.
Besides you compare the speed, anyway, you can see the difference. Like, can you find the code?
Can I see the code of Instagram.com, do you mean?
No, like the different team that we have. Besides just
You would have to have the same exact app to really see what the difference is.
So the
Something
question.
being built in React versus something being built in Rails at that same level.
Is
It
there
doesn't make
anything like-
sense though.
Is there anything like side by side that we could, like someone who actually made like something in Rails?
I
Something?
don't think so. We could research, but
Yeah, I can take a look into that a little bit later. I don't have that right now. Okay, so like I said, node modules contains all the binary versions of all the code necessary just to run this app. Then we take a look inside of public. These are all the the public things that you may or may not be using, like all the public facing assets. So like this fab icon is like your company's logo or something like that. So when I run npm start, you'll see that the little logo up in the corner, like GitHub and Google Calendars and Gmail and stuff like that. This will be the icon that shows up there. And then finally, the main thing that you guys need to worry about is everything under source. Now, source has a bunch of stuff. They have index.js, index.css. There's an index.html page under public. That's like your main entry point into like where like React starts coming in and saying like, what am I going to render out to the screen? And then we have different particular components. So app.js has a corresponding CSS and a test, and this is one particular component. Babel. And like Kara said, there is a specific syntax that JavaScript is going to be using, because this is typical JavaScript does not have classes, but like the newer versions with ES6, starting with ES6, do have classes. So you may need to change the syntax highlighting to JavaScript Babel version. So let's, so I ran npm install, I think, which is the same thing as bundle install. So it bundle installs everything together, all your libraries. This might take a little while. In the meantime, I'll let you read the Q comic.
There are more libraries in addition to the Create React app. You added more libraries to the...
I didn't do anything else. I just did Create React app. I just run npm install just as like a kind of like I run bundle every now and then just to make sure like I'm not crazy. All right, so npm install, and then I just do npm start.
That's the server.
That is the server. So you can't see it because it just loaded up on my side over here. But we are using the same port now. So yesterday when we were doing things, it was 8080. The Create React app will run on port 3000. You can kind of see there's that little fab icon that I have, and then we were playing around with the CSS to make this spin faster and spin slower. This is just the generic entry point. So I'm going to, so we're going to create this app, which is basically just going to display a small picture in the middle. And when I click it, it'll flip to the other picture. When I click it, it'll flip back and forth, back and forth. And it won't make any requests out to a database or anything like that. It's all going to happen in real time here on your machine. You've been on those websites where you can like type something in a box and it shows up on the top. You know what I'm talking about? It's like you type something in like a text box here and it automatically shows up somewhere else on the page.
Oh. But not like the drop down.
Well, you'll see it later today. All right. So just to make sure that I'm in the right place, I'm just going to say poop and refresh this page. I actually don't need to refresh the page at all, because React has something called hot reloading, which means that every single time that you change something, it'll automatically detect it and then push it out to the page. So I just changed this. I'm an adult, so I changed this and just to say poop. And at this point, I know that I'm at least altering the right file. All right. So every single class component, in our case, we have just an app component right now, is going to have two functions that are going to be across the board. There's one that's going to be called render, which is what's going to be returned out to the screen. And there could be something called a constructor. Actually, no, you should probably always have constructor on here. Constructor is to React as initialize is to Ruby. So when I have a constructor here, it's just saying I'm going to initialize this particular app component with certain properties. Inside of this constructor, I'm also going to have state. And state is essentially a hash that's a globally available to this particular component. So again, it's just a hash that full of stuff. So I have this dot state equals an empty hash, but it's going to have a key value pair of is muted as false. I'm just going to set is muted to false right at the beginning.
The props. Why do we need props if we aren't like? What exactly is that bringing in from us?
Sure. So when you have a constructor, you can pass things in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not passing things in, like if you can kind of see that I'm extending component.
Mm-hmm.
Component, if you take a look at the source code for component, there's a constructor there and then it has lots and lots of props.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to, essentially what's going to happen is I'm basically supering up to component. Remember the inheritance thing? So I'm saying I'm inheriting all the stuff that component has.
What would be like a property though? Example or something.
I'm not sure. Not positive. We'll take a look into that a little bit later. All right, so let's continue on. So there are, again, like I said, there are two functions that every single class, like React component needs. One is called render, and one is called constructor. Everything else will just be specific to this class, but these two are, constructor and render, are going to be across the board. Again, constructor is what do I need in order to get started, and the render is what's going back out to the screen. I'm going to create a couple of things. Let's get rid of all of this stuff. I don't need it for right now. I'm going to create a toggle mute function. And all the functions that you write, generally speaking, you're going to want to put a underscore in front of. I'm just going to copy this actually. So I'm going to, I have a constructor, which is going to inherit most of the stuff from component. I have a toggle mute function right here, which is basically going to overwrite the state, overwrite the original state. So remember, state is that hash that's being passed everywhere within this particular class. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to the opposite version of whatever the current state's is muted value is. So I start off with false, and I'm just going to switch to the opposite. And then finally, for the render, I'm going to first console log what this dot state is, so I can see what is muted is. And then I'm going to have a little button that basically says I'm going to basically execute toggle mute. Let's just kind of see what happens when I run this. So I'm going to just wait. It's going to hopefully refresh things for me. Please. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's actually what is supposed to show up. There's a test that shows up on the page. Let me just change the name to something more mature. Hello. Don't do anything. And here we go. So if I inspect the element, I'm just going to open up the console here. And evidently, I wrote the code so that if I click on hello, it'll do a few things. When I click on this, it will toggle the mute, which will execute this line of code here at line 14. And then it's going to overwrite the state, and then it's just going to console log that state out. So when I click it, you can kind of see that state is this hash. It consists of one key value pair, which is muted and being true and false. So when I click it, it's just going to switch it and then console log it back out to the screen. I'm going to pause here for a second and see, are there any questions especially about this?
I ended up writing a lot of my functions as like arrow functions. I guess that's an alternative to doing this.
Can you talk about that? Like, why did you write your stuff as arrow functions?
Inside there, well, started like the binding for this didn't work sometimes. Like I think I don't know why for some reason, like it would only. I mean, I understand the arrow function will pass like a different object as the owner of it, but for some reason, when I tried using that format to call my function, it just didn't work with like an on change as the call. So I'm not sure if like you actually had to pass it an arrow, like another function.
So the answer to your question is an arrow function automatically binds the context of this to whatever you're passing. So if you're passing it from one function to another, this is already bounded, so you don't have to worry about it. So yes, always use arrow functions if you can. For the rest of, for all the like regular folks like me who struggled with understanding this, imagine you're at a nightclub. We'll just Google nightclub. This could turn out bad, but let's say it's New Year's Eve and you're at the Marquee in Las Vegas, and here you're in this main crowd, right? There are always a few sections to every single nightclub. There's going to be like the general admission area, and then there's going to be an area for like VIPs and things like that. Let's say by some stroke of luck, everyone here is good looking enough to get in, definitely good looking enough to get into the VIP section. When you get into the VIP section, you have generally speaking, you have like a different wristband or some sort of identifier to say that I'm there, right? Has anyone actually been to like one of the fancy nightclubs? Okay. Mickey runs the nightclub. There it is.
He should be teaching this part.
So when you're in a fancy nightclub and you're in the executive area, or let's even say like this might be easier for people. You're on a plane and you're sitting in first class, right? You have a ticket that says that you're in first class. Thus, you are able to do certain things while you're in first class. You're able to get real silverware and drink fancy wine and eat fancy foods, right? That is something that you've been granted because you sit in first class. Now, let's say you get a little bored halfway through, either at the nightclub or you're on the plane, and you want to go down to the main floor or down to economy class and coach, and you just want to hang out there for a little while. But you still want to eat your fancy food and you still want to drink your fancy wine. Like when I'm down here in the main area and I say, I want to drink fancy food, they're like, I'm sorry, we don't serve that here, because you're a regular common folk. You're not going to get the fancy food and the fancy wine. But so how would you say, like, actually, I am in first class, or I'm from the VIP section? How, like, I am supposed to be getting the fancy food and the fancy wine. Like, how would you prove that? You show them the wristband, or you show them like the plane ticket saying like, hey, I'm actually in seat like 5A or something like that. So there's a way to identify, even though I'm out of context, like here I am with all the common folk on the main ground floor, I'm actually a VIP. I get to experience, I still get to eat my caviar while everyone else is eating hamburgers or something like that. I can order caviar from the ground floor, even though they're not supposed to serve that because I'm a VIP. That same concept transfers over to here inside this code. When you go inside of, when you go to toggle mute, or even like all of this stuff. So I have this and then bind and then this. Let's just kind of break this down. This currently refers to the entire class. When I call toggle mute, inside of toggle mute, there's another this. Like, so I'm not sure what you're talking about anymore. It's a similar concept of I was in the VIP section, now I'm on the common floor, and I want to access certain things. This becomes ambiguous. Like there's a this inside of render, there's a this inside of toggle mute. Which this are you talking about at that point? And that's where this bind comes in. So when I bind the context of this, God, I hate this so much. They're going to get rid of this, no pun intended, I'm pretty sure at one point. But essentially, here I am in render. When I refer to this, it makes sense that I'm talking about the render function, right? Because that's what I'm currently inside. Then I call toggle mute. Toggle mute also has this inside of it. So when it says, when I call toggle mute inside of render, are you talking about this being the render's this or the toggle mute's this? So that's where this, like, the binding of this goes inside. It's saying,
and bind means toggles this.
Yeah, so it's basically saying inside of toggle mute, you're going to be calling this. You see that here on line 15. It's ambiguous of what this is at this point. But by binding this, like the original this,
The context of renders this.
it's saying that the content I'm passing in renders this into toggle mute, so that when it refers to this, it's actually referring to renders this.
What is the first this then?
This refers to the
app.
The app.
The app class. So you're saying app classes toggle mute bind the context of the app class when I say this inside of toggle mute.
But if you put by in the front again, let's say you put by this, toggle mute by this, what we're gonna go to? Like if
Let's
you
see.
put by this.
If I put bind right here,
No, like by before this.
So
Like
bind is a message you would put on something, so you wouldn't just call it by itself.
yeah, I wouldn't put it like, it's always going to be dot bind. So it has to be attached to something else. So you're not going to just bind like this. The issue is, like, right now we're only dealing with one component, but soon you're going to be dealing with multiple components, like you did with, like we started off with like just like a cat class or like an animal class, right? And then we started passing Ruby objects from one class to another to another. When we did apple trees, we had apple trees, we had apples, we had apple orchard and things like that. You're going to be passing down and calling different methods from different classes. So yeah, so that's where the binding of this is going to be important. Right now we're only dealing with one class component, and soon you're going to be dealing with multiple.
And if they have one class underneath another class, when we call by this, do we call just the main class, or we have to call the parent class and the?
Yeah. So the question was, let's say I have another class, right? I'm not going to really go into this one too much. Let's say I have a person class. I'm going to grab all this stuff in here, just shove this in there. Let's say I'm going to create, like, I'm going to call another person here. So I'm going to do person, and I'm going to pass down some sort of method. Method-y. Actually, I don't want to get into this right now. I don't really want to start confusing people too much.
I say you can do like a dot bind and then the name of the class.
You can dot bind to this, and then it'll be bound. Like, so when I call, let's say that another class needed toggle mute.
Yeah.
Toggle mute only exists in the context of app.
Right.
So I need to bind it to this when I pass it down.
Okay.
This meaning app.
So you could put app inside of there, or you would. No, you pass it. Okay, never mind. Okay.
And what about the set state? Is that on the toggle mute?
1 second. What'd you say?
The set state, like that is that's an attribute. Or
So this refers to app right now. And it's basically saying I'm going to overwrite this set state is a method that's built into React. It overwrites the state. It overwrites a part of the state hash that's being passed through. So this allows me to basically say, when I do set state, I'm going to overwrite what's currently inside of state. And specifically what I'm going to overwrite is I'm going to say is muted. I'm going to change that to be the opposite of what it is right now.
Where do you get the method on that React from? Like set
State
state.
is a part of component. That's why you're using extends component from React. You're bringing in all of the functions and behaviors.
Yeah, but I mean, where do you find
You
it?
don't see it. You would, if you want, you can go into GitHub and look at React's like component stuff. The same way you wouldn't go into necessarily. You wouldn't go into like Rails and like dive in. You've never seen all of the methods Active Record can do.
And how are we going to be
Use
able to use it? Like, because we don't know.
That's what we're teaching.
That's what we're
right
teaching
now.
now.
You can also look at GitHub, Facebook, GitHub, React's documentation. They have all this stuff laid out. So just know that set state is the method you use when you want to modify state of any given component in React. It's a method given to you by component.
So we say we use a set state, and what else that we actually use?
You're going to
Render
use.
is also a function that's constructor is JavaScript specific, but it's an important component when you're dealing with or it's an important function when you're dealing with a class. So yeah, those aren't
3 big things.
made up.
Constructor is initialize, render is being what's coming out to the screen, and then set state. Set state is going to overwrite the state for this particular instance of this particular component.
Because to set up the state, is have to do something with the event, like when they have the mouse click.
So to set up the state, one more time.
Yeah, to set up like the state,
Mhm.
that part is have to do something with the event, like function event. Like,
Yeah. So at the beginning, when this is first loaded up, I have a state hash, right? This is a hash, and it's basically saying it has a key of is muted, and it's going to be false. Now, there are a bunch of things called event handlers, which I think that's what you're talking about. When some event happens on the page, then something is going to fire off. So if you take a look over here, if I click anywhere else, like nothing's happening right now, right? Because there's no event handler attached to other areas of the page. But if I go onto this hello area, you can kind of see here, whenever I click it, this particular code is going to run. So when I click anywhere else, nothing happens, but when I click on the hello, something happens. So that's what's called an event handler. So there's things like on click, there's something when it's like on key, there's things called like on key release. There's a whole bunch of event handlers, JavaScript. Where are they? There's a button on click. There are, when anything has been changed, whenever you mouse over something, something could happen. When on key down, when on load, there's like a whole bunch of different events that can happen. So for some websites, they will take your information. The moment you start hitting a key, they'll start recording. And that's unfortunately just what happens. That's kind of what we talked about yesterday. I remember people saying that was pretty scary. All right, let's continue on. So we have a class that basically loads everything up, and then when I click, it'll toggle the mute button, like the state. But that's not really getting the picture out to the screen. So I'm going to start separating out things into single responsibility classes because I don't want this getting too huge. So under here, I'm going to create a components folder. You can kind of remember from Rails when we were dealing with models, all the models went inside the model folder, all the controllers went inside the controller folder, so on and so forth. So let's create a component called mute button, another folder under here. And inside of here, I'm going to have 2 things. I'm going to have mute button.js, and then I'm going to have mute button.test.js. Every single file is going to have its own corresponding specs. Let's get rid of this for now. Let's get rid of this for now. And I'm going to just have this code here. So line 1, I'm importing React and the component, specifically the component library from the React npm package. And then right here, I'm going to have mute button extend from React components, similar to what we have here. And I can have a constructor if I need it, but right now all I have is I'm going to render this out to the page. Basically, if this .props that is muted is true, like if the thing I'm passing down, if the state of it is true, like the is muted is true, I'm going to have just a word that says on. And then if it not, I'm just going to have a word that says off. So this is doing all the logic of showing whether or not something is turned on or turned off right now. Inside of app.js, I'm going to kind of take out all of this stuff here. I'm going to instead just do that. Right now I have just is true just to get something out on the page. We're going to change this to be more dynamic and read from state a little bit later. Yes.
Back in view button.
Mm-hmm.
It's extending React dot component.
Mm-hmm.
But you're importing React, so can you delete that? I had like an error with that when I had React dot component. So I was looking through the React, is it like the docs or whatever? It was saying the React dot component, but when I deleted the React part, it was working.
So when you got rid of this?
No, like the extends part. It was giving me an error when I.
So you just did extends
component.
So you just did this?
Yeah, I just want to know like why does that matter if I'm importing React?
I think
Because
one is a little bit.
Error
I think one is a little bit older syntax. Let's do this. Let's come back to this and let's fix the things on the page, and we'll remove this and see what happens. So for right now, let's just get something on the page. Right now it says mute button is not defined in app.js. So on 24 it says mute button is not defined. So what do I need to add in order to get that to show up? Yep. So unfortunately, React is not as, they don't assume that you need access to everything like Rails. Like you never have to require a relative or anything like that at the top of a Rails app, but inside of React you do. So I'm here at app.js. I need to get into, the components. I need to get into the mute button folder. And then I need to get to mutebutton.js. All right, let's see if something happens on the screen. I'm not touching it. What's going on with you? Oh, here we go. All right, so line 25, mute button is not defined.
The JS.
Perhaps I forgot the JS. Maybe a semicolon?
Do you need to explicitly say import mute button?
I believe you do. Import mute button from, yeah, I'm stupid. Ah, great, we got something. So let's see what I did. So I imported the mute button. I'm saying like I'm going to call something called mute button from, and that's going to call all of the code from this particular file, which is right here. I'm calling it in line 25, and I'm passing down something here. So this is the class. So instead of doing like mute button dot new with like is muted true or something like that, I'm instead passing it down like mute button with, I'm passing down a prop called is muted equals true. This gets passed down into mute button, and it's passed down as a prop. They're going to say this dot props dot is muted, which is going to read from here. They're saying if this dot props is muted is going to equal true, then what shows up on the screen is the words on. If not, it's going to show the word off. So as of right now, we have the word on.
When you import, you don't need the .js.
When I import, I don't need the .js. It's automatically assuming that it's going to be a JS.
What else is available under props? Like in terms of when you go back to the app. Yeah. So where, like this dot props, does that include anything like within that div or just inside the mute?
So this is the class this is the component that I'm rendering out on the page, which is just rendering a new version of mute button. I'm passing in is true. Like these are the props that I'm passing in. It's just this key and this value. I can pass in anything else, literally anything else equals hi or something like that. And then maybe I will
It's so weird syntax. You'd think it would be like a function. You'd want to like pass it in like a function call inside of like ellipsis or something.
Could be. How am I supposed to? We just do this.
You just use the brackets.
Just brackets like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right.
Oh, it's giving you the error about adjacent things. So right now you have basically sibling divs.
Mm-hmm.
So you can only have one level of div returned at a time.
That's fair.
So it would have to be nested into the div.
Yep. So that's kind of like, so you can kind of see I passed in any other prop named whatever I'd like, and then I can just call that over here. But for us, we're just going to deal with is muted. So right now we're hard coding is muted to be equal to true, and instead we want to read from the current state. And then when I click on it, it's going to toggle and change. So I'm going to do this dot state dot is muted. So instead of just hard coding to true or false, I'm going to be reading from this state hash that we have here.
You directly put this dot state dot is muted in the function.
I can, because this dot state refers to up here, and that is actually just a value being passed back and forth. So as of right now, this should still, right now it's off because it's by default going to be false to start with. Great. All right, now we need to pass in what's called a callback to the toggle mute function, so that when it's clicked, it actually fires off the event. That being said, you can't actually attach event handlers directly to React. Where's my mouse? You can't actually attach React components directly to, you can't attach event handlers directly onto React components. So yeah, in the end, it should look a little something like this. So what I'm doing here, what I've added, I guess. At first, it was I just passed in whatever the state's is muted property was, right? At first, it was just going to be this off button right here, because it's just by default this is just going to be false. But I also need to pass down an entire on click. So it's basically saying when I click on something, when I pass down this on click prop, it's binding up to the toggle mute. Remember what I said a little bit earlier? You're like, when am I ever going to like bind to like when I'm passing between classes? I'm inside of app, and inside of app there's going to be, I'm rendering another component called mute button. Mute button's going to show up on the screen, and then whenever I click on it, it's going to execute this toggle mute button right here. And then when I go down here, I have the ability to hit the toggle mute. Let's see kind of what happens. If all works well, I can click on this and it changes, but it's not doing that. Uh-oh. Let's see. Let's see what's going on. What do you all think? Like why? So what should be happening is when I click on off, the word should actually turn to on, but it's not doing anything right now.
Bothered by the this.props.
This.props.toggle mute.
Because you're returning that to the other, so shouldn't it?
Wait, so why is on click set twice? Not there, but set in the app as well, isn't it? Shouldn't you just have one click on where the button is?
Yeah, that's because I'm stupid and I named it the wrong thing. Yeah. I just named it the wrong thing. Good call. So again, I started with mute button. I'm passing down two properties. One is called isMuted, which is just going to be true and false. Another one is an onClick, which is actually an entire function. And it's referring to this being the entire class, toggleMute.bind this, because inside of toggleMute, I'm using the word this. So I need to bind it to all of app since I'm using it inside of mute button. And inside of here, what I've got is it's basically whenever I click it, it's going to execute this on-click thing that I'm passing down from up here. So whenever I on-click it, it's actually just going to hit toggle mute. Again, I can call this whatever I want. And then down here, I can just do this.props. Whatever I want. And it'll do the same thing. And you can kind of see this is happening here on my browser. It's not happening anywhere else. It's not happening in the back end. It's not happening on the server. Everything is happening here right on my machine. And finally, since we can get on and off pretty easily like this, let's get the pictures in there, and then that will take us through this entire challenge. So lastly, let's display the image instead of the words on and off. So I'm just going to do imports. Maybe I'll call it on icon. And I'm here, so I need to go out all the way to icons into on and off. So import on icon from, let's see. So I need to go up one level, up another level. And then I'm, okay, up one level, up one level, up one more. What do you think?
Is that an ending? Okay, too.
So source and icons are at the same place. So I know at some point I'm going to need to get to icon/on SVG. So I'm here, dot goes up to here, dot goes up to here, dot goes up to here. I think I need one more. And we'll do the same thing with off icon as well. Can you open that door? Kind of what's going on? Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. We're one cord short for my laptop. So you guys have a spare adapter.
For that particular laptop?
Yes, the Model 13. It's not the newest one, but the one.
Who has? I don't personally have that charger.
Oh, I don't know if this is
I think that is the right one. Maybe it is.
And I'll bring it back in. Oh, no, that's.
oh, this is the it might.
Let me see.
can test it on this.
Can I see that? That is.
The one I have is different,
That one
but
should work. We'll see. You can plug it in and let us know. All right. Okay, cool. So we have an on icon and an off icon, and if all goes well, I can get these pictures somewhere on the screen. Okay.
But I'll bring it back in
Okay, sure.
Thank you so much.
Yep. On icon and off icon. Let's see if this works. Uh-oh. It says module not found. You tried to import. I think I have too many dots. Too many dots. Oh, come on. Okay, module not found. I can't find icons off SVG. Huh. Wait. This is not. 1, 2. I think icons has to be in source. Maybe? Perhaps. Let's find out. Let's try moving this into source. All right, so I'm here. I'm going to go out one, icon source. All right, let's see what happens. Failed to compile, can't resolve, blah, blah, blah.
How is logo being run in from app? If you look at FPS, it's a Casper. Maybe you can use that dot slash.
Well, it's actually right next to it. It's in the same place. So let's see. I'm here. I'm going to go out to mute button. Up one more to components, go down to icons, and then go to SVG. No? Go out one to mute button, go out to components, go to icons, and then on.
Wait, is icons a source now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's just, like the source.
I'm just for kicks, I'm just gonna move it in the same folder for now. Cool. At least I got it on there. So now I can, if all goes well, I should be able to toggle back and forth between being on and off. You can kind of see that this is that mute button that we were talking about. All right. Are there any questions? I'm sure that there are for right now. Are there any questions on like basic React? Like this is all like very, very basic right now. We're not really doing much besides just kind of like learning the ins and outs and all the things revolving around this.
Is this in the notes or?
Yeah, I'm currently writing it right now, so
Okay.
you should be okay.
I'm following.
I think so. Anything else, Nikki?
I have to see.
Sure, that makes sense. All right, let me stop recording here.